Hello and welcome to Sophieco. My name's Sophie and today we're going to be discussing what zero waste actually means. Now the word zero waste, or rather the phrase zero waste, indicates that you are producing zero waste whatsoever. But even if you look at the kind of icons of the zero waste movement who are producing a jar which is only got a few bits of rubbish inside it, they're still producing some waste. Even if it's that tiny amount, they're still producing some waste. It is almost impossible to create zero waste whatsoever. So the idea of the zero waste movement is, it should really be called the low waste movement rather than zero waste movement, because the idea is to lessen your waste, reduce the amount of waste that you're producing. And realistically, most people will never reach the level of having a jar filled with trash and that's all that you produce. That is not possible for most people in the world that we currently live in. Obviously, ideally, that would be great. Ideally, we'd live in a world with amazing facilities to buy products with no packaging whatsoever, but it's just not the way that we live at the moment. So yeah, for most people, that's probably not possible at the moment, but that doesn't mean that there's nothing you can do. For me, zero waste really boils down to two key aims. The first being to reduce the amount of rubbish that you're sending to landfill, and the second to reduce the amount of resources that you consume. What do I mean by resources? Well, literally anything that you consume in any capacity whatsoever, whether it be water, electricity, food, clothes, packaging for products, absolutely anything that you're consuming in whatever capacity it might be that is not essential could be considered waste. And even then you've got levels of how to reduce your waste. So for example, food waste is one of the worst forms of waste. And I talk about it a lot on my channel, but it really is, because food waste that has gone to landfill creates methane. At least plastic, although plastic is bad, at least when plastic goes to landfill it just sits there and does nothing. Food waste releases methane, which if you don't know is a greenhouse gas that is even worse, has even more greenhouse effects to it than carbon dioxide. So it really is awful for the environment, and we should be doing as much as we can to prevent excess methane from going into the atmosphere. So one way to reduce your level of food waste would be to compost your food scraps, or if you don't have availability of a composter, then hopefully your local council collects food waste, and if not, then that's, it's a whole other different issue. And the reason that I get so frustrated is because so many councils don't collect things that they really should be collecting, but my local council collects food waste, so it's fine. All of my food that I'm not consuming goes into the food waste. But even more than that, even better than that, is to reduce the amount of food that you buy in the first place. Because it's not just the actual food itself going to landfill that causes issues, it's the amount of resources that it's taken to create that food. Because to create that food, there's had to be land used to grow that food. There has to be water used. There's likely been vehicles involved in, firstly, the actual agriculture side of things, such as tractors, combine harvesters, but also the transport of getting that food from the field where it was grown to eventually the supermarket or whatever shop that you bought it from. And if all you then do with that food is put it in the bin, even if you're putting it in the compost, that's still a massive waste of resources, so still comes under zero waste. But of course, if food really is inedible and you're really not going to eat it, then please put it in the compost rather than in your bin that's going to go to landfill, because that is still horrific for the environment. So why does plastic come up in the zero waste conversation so frequently? Because plastic is recyclable, right? Well, yes, but when it comes to zero waste, recycling is considered to be the last resort for items. So you should be considering reducing the amount of items that you're using in the first place. So in the example of plastic packaging, reducing the amount of packaging that you need. So for example, if you go to a shop and you're buying some apples, you would use a cotton produce bag or another type of reusable bag to put those apples in, rather than using a single-use plastic bag that's then going to go in the bin. or you could be really trashy like me and just not use a bag at all, because, you know, I just don't see the need for it. I just don't see the need for it. And then reuse is also a huge part of zero waste. So I have a collection of glass jars that I reuse for a variety of different things, and generally whenever I buy anything that's in a glass jar, I will keep that jar, unless it's like a really weird shape and I really wouldn't use it again, but normally I will keep the glass jar to reuse. And then you go on to recycle. So if you can't reduce the amount of waste and you can't reuse whatever packaging it is, then you should be recycling it. But there's an issue with plastic, because when you're recycling something such as glass or such as aluminium, that can be recycled again and again and again and again for all of eternity pretty much. Plastic cannot. Plastic can only be recycled a couple of times, and each time that you recycle plastic it loses quality. So it's not infinite. Eventually, even if that plastic is recycled, it's gonna go to landfill. And there's also a problem at the moment. You might have heard about certain places refusing to accept plastic recycling. A few months back, China stopped accepting imports of plastic recycling from the UK. And I've also horrifically heard that there are some councils in the UK that have actually stopped collecting plastic recycling altogether, which is concerning. But again, if you do have, say, a plastic bottle or another plastic item that can be recycled and you're really not going to reuse it, then the zero waste, or the zero waste thing to do would be to recycle it. So you always have to look at things from your perspective, things from how your life is, and what you can do to reduce your impact one step at a time. So why is zero waste so important? Because isn't climate change the big environmental issue at the moment? And well, yes, climate change is a huge issue, but the zero waste movement is also contributing to preventing, or hopefully preventing, catastrophic climate change. Because essentially a lot of the ways that so many greenhouse gases have gotten into the environment so far is because of humans' very wasteful habits. So for the example that I gave earlier, people producing food for that food to then be just thrown in the bin rather than even being consumed. And so that then results in these methane gases being released. The transport that has taken the food from field to wherever likely has used fossil fuels. That's a whole other issue, but it's likely used fossil fuels to get it from A to B. And of course there's the land issue as well, because there are forests being grown down for agriculture on a huge basis. And this is also why vegetarianism and veganism often comes into the zero waste argument, because, not to get into it too much in this video, but producing meat and dairy is very wasteful in terms of how many resources you use to create a certain amount of food, a certain amount of calories, if you consider it that way, compared to the amount of resources that it takes to create an equivalent amount of calories in a completely plant-based meal. And then of course there's also the fact that waste is contaminating our environment. I'm sure you've seen the images of plastic oceans just completely covered in a huge layer of plastic, and animals suffering because they have caught themselves up in some plastic rubbish. And there was even a news article I read today where they'd found plastic at the deepest part of the ocean that they've now been able to discover. They still found it there, right at the bottom of the ocean, well, as far as humans can go down. And that's just horrific. Ultimately, human actions are causing not just climate change, but also issues to habitats, issues to people's homes, but also to animals' homes. And there's going to come a point when that damage is irreversible, and we need to do something to prevent it from getting to that point where it's irreversible. So what can you do? Well, the first thing I would say is, if you're really stuck on what to do, then maybe watch some YouTube videos. I've got a whole channel dedicated to this stuff, but there are lots of other YouTubers out there as well who are dedicated to showing you ways to reduce your waste in your everyday life. Also maybe considering joining local environmental groups or Facebook environmental groups. They certainly have lots and lots of ideas on how to reduce your waste in every area of your life. And a lot of groups are very, very supportive and will help you, and understanding if you're starting from the very, very beginning and have no idea whatsoever about how to go about reducing your waste. And if you do have any specific questions on certain areas that you want to reduce your waste in, then you can always ask me to create a video about it, and I will do that gladly, because I want to help as many people as possible to reduce the amount of waste that they're producing in a way that is healthy and appropriate for them. So I really hope you found this video helpful. It's a bit of a different video for me, but I thought it might be useful for a lot of people out there who really don't understand what zero waste means, because there's a lot of different arguments about what zero waste is being thrown about. But I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give it a little like down below. Comment with any areas of zero waste that you're still not sure about, that you'd like me to go into further detail, or any ways that you'd like me to help you on your zero waste journey. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more, and I will see you next time.